The U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has left Beijing after having high-level meetings on trade and business. Raimondo met with China's Premier Li Qiang and Vice Premier He Lifeng. The visit comes as the two sides endeavor to ease tensions after years of trade battles. CGTN's Zheng Shengyi joins us live now from Beijing with the very latest.
Well, thank you, Sean. We know that Raimondo left Beijing for Shanghai last night to kick off the last day of her China visit. And over the past 3 days, she has met many Chinese government, as you just mentioned, government officials, including Premier Li Qiang, Vice Premier He Lifeng, and of course, her Chinese counterpart, Wang Wentao. And during the 3-day trip, Raimondo emphasized many times that the United States had no intention to hinder China's economic progress, and that the United States is willing to work together with China to seek more common grounds and to improve their business situation and promote trade. But unlike previous U.S. high officials, like Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Climate Envoy John Kerry, who all left China without any concrete or tangible results, Secretary Raimondo's visit this time has witnessed some very concrete outcomes. For example, they have decided to exchange information on U.S. export controls, which frustrated companies of both countries and limits the companies of both countries. And they've also agreed to set up a China-U.S. working group to discuss other commercial issues as well. And that is believed, and that consultation mechanism is believed to be by many as a sign of some movement toward a slightly more normal trading relationship. And in addition to trade and economic ties, Raimondo also met with Minister of Culture and Tourism, where the two agreed on the significance of promoting people-to-people exchanges. And they've agreed to hold a tourism leadership summit in China next year. And today, she is expected to visit New York University in Shanghai and the Shanghai Disneyland as well, and to hold a presser to wrap up her 4-day visit. And we'll keep you updated then. That's all from me. Back to you, Sean.
Okay, Zheng Shengyi, thank you so much for that report. We're going to get more on the significance of Gina Raimondo's visit to China. Joining us now is Neysun Mahboubi. He joins us via Skype. He is a research scholar at the Center for Study of Contemporary China at the University of Pennsylvania. Neysun, always a pleasure. Thank you for coming in. I want to get right to it. How do the United States and China get beyond the politeness, the niceties of having these high-level visits? The fourth one in just a matter of, what, 6 months or so. And your takeaway, how significant is this working group going to be?
I mean, you say, how do we get beyond it? But just, establishing some polite visits is such a huge step forward, given where the relationship has been for the past few years, that I say let's take the win for now and enjoy the fact that the two countries are at least establishing these polite channels of discussion. Sure, we may want to see some more progress on more substantive points going forward, but simply having this series of relatively friendly and productive, at least in style, meetings, I think is quite an achievement. And if there is, in fact, this working group that generates out of this Raimondo visit, that is a tangible step forward beyond the kinds of things that we've seen with the prior visits over the past few months.
Yeah, I think perhaps maybe I should have chosen my words a little more delicately in that. But let's talk about the economic topics. What do you expect to see progress on in U.S.-China relations? China obviously upset with the fact that the United States and President Biden keeping the tariffs, the punishing tariffs in place, and also the ongoing chip war that has been talked about for some time.
So I think, frankly, both of those we're not going to see a lot of movement on. The tariffs, that seems to be more or less a static situation right now. And frankly, I'm not even sure the Chinese side is pushing so hard on the tariffs. If anyone is concerned about the tariffs, it's U.S. business and U.S. consumers to the extent that they're thinking about it. But in any case, I think the politics of the tariffs are pretty fixed at this point. We know that Donald Trump has indicated that if he comes back into power, all the tariffs are going to come back across the board. And so in any case, I just don't think tariffs is an item of movement right now. The chip war in the same way, I think there's a lot of sort of political basis for that here in the U.S. that is going to be hard to chip away from, to make a slightly indelicate comment. But there may be other things outside of tariffs and chips that could be places of some kind of progress going forward. At a minimum, getting businesses to be back in the kind of dynamics that we've seen in the past of having businessmen feel comfortable working in China and Chinese businessmen starting to invest again in the U.S. That, in and of itself, I think, would be some step forward and could happen in the coming months based on the way that this meeting went.
I think it's also important to point out that Monday night, Secretary Raimondo also pointed out that 99% of the trade between the United States and China are not affected by these tariffs, are not affected by any policies. We hear time and again from both sides that China and the United States should have healthy competition, but not in a contentious way. How to move beyond?
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
The U.S. side clearly is very insistent on this language of competitive dynamics, but still having some cooperative dynamics as well. For a long time, the Chinese side was resistant to that, but I think the Chinese side has started to accept it to some degree. And so I think that's kind of the equilibrium that we are settling into, which is that both sides recognize there will be certain issues which will remain contentious, but maybe in the interstices of those issues, there will be some areas where the two sides can reach common ground. And I think there's so much pressure on both sides, in part because of the economic picture in both countries, to reach some kind of greater degree of stability that maybe there will be, in fact, this new equilibrium, both some aspects of contention, but also some aspects of cooperation.
I think also when you talk about the impacts, it's not just China and the United States that have something at stake here. Clearly, global economies are watching very closely. One of the first and second largest economies in the world do meet face to face. Firstly, how do you think that these talks are being digested between the two nations? And secondly, from an international standpoint?
Well, one thing that's certain is that both countries, both the U.S. and China, have become much more sensitive to how their actions vis-a-vis each other are being read in other parts of the world. That's a new dimension, and it's a really important one. I think there's a lot of this that can be stylistic, but I do think both sides care quite a great deal what countries in the Asia-Pacific, what countries in Europe think that the U.S. or the China respectively is bringing to these kinds of negotiations and these kinds of dynamics. So what the countries in those parts of the world think, that's a bigger question, and I maybe a little harder to answer, but at least it's clear that both the U.S. and China are very much hoping that their actions vis-a-vis each other look good to other parts of the world.
Wonderful. Neysun Mahboubi, I want to thank you very much for your time. We certainly appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much.